This is Teaching to the Test Pattern.
Hey, buddy, this is Teaching to the Test Pattern. I'm Tom White. And on today's show, a very good friend of mine, Zach Garrett from the Riverside Military Academy. I decided that during this time of just turmoil and chaos, that instead of just doing industry people, I would get the perspective of teachers. And Zach has a pretty unique perspective because he's at a pretty unique school. So some really cool stuff in this series with Zach. Probably going to be 3 episodes, but we talk about what it's like working on at a military school. So it's pretty rad. Speaking of rad, you like that segue? Amitrace, AMITRACE.com. That's where you need to go. Listen, I make a lot of assumptions, and I assume that since you do video at your school, you're more than likely involved in a church or a nonprofit org or somewhere like that, or just have friends who want to learn how to do video. If it's overwhelming right now because everybody's asking you for help, send them to Amitrace, AMITRACE.com. Listen, they're not new. They've been around 30 years. They're family owned. They're not some massive mega corporation. And they don't just go, hey, here's a kit. They have a consultation with you, and they will determine exactly what you need for what you want to get. AMITRACE.com. Go check that out. You could probably do it while you're listening to this podcast with me and Zach Garrett from Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia.
Teaching to the Test Pattern.
We probably should have saved all of that for the show.
We probably should have. We can repeat some of it.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was like, I've been recording the whole time, but I don't know how I would work that back into the show or into the edit. But
it's the pre-show.
Yeah, the pre-show. If you didn't, that's an extra fee. You got to pay a fee to hear the pre-show. So I'm talking with my buddy Zach Garrett from Riverside Military Academy, and Zach, tell us what you do. Tell us what you do up there, and what you've done so far, because you've done some pretty big things so far.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for having me on the podcast. I enjoy listening to it. It's just another great thing to really connect with when we're done teaching in the day. Get to hear some more things and about video production, and I'm really excited about sharing some things. On campus here at Riverside, we have a unique opportunity to work with students that live here. So we're a boarding school. We're also a high school and middle school. And we also have the military infused into it. And so with the military is basically just a junior ROTC program. And so we're at other schools where junior ROTC is a club. Here at Riverside, everybody's enrolled in junior ROTC. Now the middle school is a little bit different. They do all the junior ROTC stuff, but legally with the Army standards, they are not in junior ROTC. So they don't participate in some of the bigger events we've got. But it's kind of cool. And so what's cool is we've got all these kids that live here. And before I came here, there was no video program. And how I got here, and I'm kind of jumping around. I got your questions here, so
you're cheating.
I know I'm cheating. I've got how I got here was actually through the lanes of a cadet. So I started here as a cadet in high school. So I went here for 4 years, graduated here, and then went on to my undergraduate and graduate programs. But when I was in my graduate program at Georgia, I was trying to find a place to kind of land, to get started. We had a student teaching requirement, and I was actually getting my degree in language education because I speak Spanish as well. And so that was what I was doing. But I've done video for years. It's kind of like my passion on the side. So when I was coming back here, I offered Riverside a chance to start a program because we were having some issues here on campus, really getting the word out. All of our families of our cadets, they tune in on Facebook, they tune in on YouTube and Instagram, and they're looking for stuff, right? Because it's a boarding school and they can't be here, so they're looking for content. And our public relations office at that time was only staffed with about 2 people. And you can't cover a school with 500 something kids and all the events, we have all the same Georgia high school, spring, fall, winter sports. We have all those clubs going on. And so I said, well, what if y'all let me start a class, not a club, but a class that focuses on highlighting these things and helps the PR team. we'll call it video production, and we'll teach them everything about lighting, sound, and recording. And they were like, that's awesome. At the same time, I was getting my student teaching requirement for Spanish. So I was observing a Spanish teacher here. So I was sort of playing both hats. So, and then fast forward to today, I've been here. This is my 4th year, and I now teach full-time video. I don't teach Spanish anymore because the demand for video just far exceeded the Spanish demand, even though my mom tells me I still need to teach a Spanish section because it'll help me. But thanks, Mom. I'll get that back up next year, I think, if I have time. But I teach full-time video, and now we have a full cadet-driven news show, Eagle News Network, as the top of the program. And the entry point to the program is a middle school 8th grade survey course. It's kind of like an intro to video production. I actually, quick side note, I just follow the AVTF1 standards for that class, and I just get them straight in. And then those kids have priority enrollment if they come back for their freshman year to be in AVTF1, because I've already taught them all the stuff. So I kind of jumped around. So
no, it's all good. No, that's good. That's it's good to hear the recruiting aspect there, because that's often missed. And I wondered how you did that. I mean, obviously with everyone in one building, it's a little bit easier. But I like to hear that you're getting those guys in 8th grade so that you can groom them the way you want them, and so that you really have 5 years with them as opposed to 4 years like most.
Absolutely.
So what made you get into video? Like what was the trigger for you for video?
You know, it's interesting. I can remember the very day that I was triggered with video. And I was in middle school, and I was watching a Steve Jobs keynote with Apple. I've always been an Apple fanatic. I wear Apple stuff. I have it in my pocket. I'm talking on one right now. I mean, it's just kind of my life. And I did work for Apple for a little bit as well. But back in middle school, one of the keynotes I was watching they were talking about iMovie HD, which was their product at the time. And they had Final Cut Pro as well, but I was just focusing on that because I was dabbling in some of the edits, trying to figure that thing out. And then they talked about one of their Apple employees or somebody came back from a vacation, and they wanted to really kind of highlight their vacation, but iMovie HD was just so limited. And so that's when they rewrote iMovie, and it became that star icon. Mm-hmm. And it was I think it was yellow at the time. I just remember all the different senses, but they were showing about how easy it was. Like, it had a magnetic timeline, and it was all this stuff, and how easy it was to create an experience of what you are experiencing in your life just on video. And so that's when I started editing video. I made a commercial for my dad's business at that time, and that's kind of where Zach Garrett Productions started, which is sort of my side thing. Fast forward through high school, I was here at Riverside in high school, and I took, they didn't have a video production program at the time. So I did, computer science was the closest class they offered. And so I was in my senior year, I was in computer science 5, which I don't even know if that even had a standard attached to it, but it was an offering. And so I was in there, and I was just doing video work. I mean, I was doing kind of like a senior project, and I was incorporating yearbook photos and doing interviews and things like that. And then in college, I did some video work for some of my student organizations I was in. And then I actually branched a little bit into photography, because we know that they share the same principles. Mm-hmm. People love getting pictures taken of themselves.
It's a great way to make a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. That's what I tell my students all the time. And so I did graduation photos. I did senior photos, couples, engagement sessions, all that stuff. And that's kind of how I was put into video. And I've been in it ever since. And I just love it. I love seeing how much it changes. And it's also the most frustrating thing as well. You finally learn something, and then the whole interface changes. Yeah. I can remember when I first learned Final Cut, and then they changed the interface completely. And I remember everybody was upset about that. But now, I mean, you can see why they do things like that, but for the feature set. But it was a good experience to start that back in middle school, kind of cultivate that in high school, and then really experience that in college. And of course, I still do some side work during the summer and things like that.
So talk about, with your job, you're in a unique situation with a boarding school. What's the hardest part of that? I mean, how does that different from, and you've obviously, we've got a pretty good network of video teachers throughout the state, and you've interacted with a bunch of us. that are on the other side. What is the big difference that you have there at Riverside versus what everyone else experiences?
People might think that because I'm at a boarding school, it's so much easier to get access to my students. And the unfortunate truth is that that's not the case. To be fair, we have a lot of our news team meetings with my kids 8:00 at night here in the studio. I have them all down here. That's kind of something you probably always can't do at a public school, but that takes a lot of work to make that happen, because as soon as we let go of our kids at 3:30, the military side takes over. And so we have counterparts that live in the dorms, the barracks that we call them, and they are called TAC officers or teacher, advisor, counselor. And so they are the ones that receive the kids from the academic buildings, and then they take over until 11 o'clock that night when the kids go to sleep. And so I've had to work a lot on those relationships with those, because each of my kids are in different units, different company levels that they're in. So I have to kind of pull them all down from these various areas to meet with them. And so that's probably the most unique thing is that they live here, but it's still difficult to get them because time-wise. And it's also these kids, it too, you've got producers in your program that are 3-sport athletes, and they're being pulled by their coaches. And I don't want to infringe on the coach's time, because their coach's time is just as important as my time. And I've got clubs and other things going on. And so
teaching to the test pattern.
There you have it. Military school, not necessarily the easiest place to get access to your students. I was under the perception that, hey, they live there, I should be able to just go grab them anytime. And Zach explains that that's not always the case. Make sure that you check out the next 2 episodes of this conversation with Zach, where we talk more about what he has done to build his program over the last 4 years, and kind of his goals and what he's going to do with the program. And those are coming up. They'll all be released. I'm just going to release everything in one day instead of what I was doing before, because, well, you may have more free time. In your free time, make sure you go to Amitrace.com. Thank those guys for supporting this podcast. I literally wouldn't be able to do it without them. They have provided me with contacts. They have helped me so much to get this podcast off the ground in the first 3 months as we hit our 30-something episode today with this conversation. Thank you for listening to the 30-some-odd episodes. And as always, go make some awesome.
Teaching to the test pattern.